Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Chief Executive Officer, Institute for Sustainable Investing, Morgan Stanley, Audrey Choi.
Well, good afternoon. It is such an honor to be here today, and what two very hard acts to follow. Unlike what Tony and Rip have been describing, I want to talk to you today about some work that we've been doing that is not specifically hyper-concentrated in one geographical location. What we've been working on at Morgan Stanley is actually working across communities in a number of places across the country to really try to figure out what are the places where we can have investments structured in such a way that they can really help accelerate the kind of dramatic place-based change that Rip and Tony are trying to drive. And how do we make sure that we get the tools to bring private sector investors at scale into communities across the country? So I'm going to just tell you about, I think, three sort of high-level lessons that we've kind of gleaned out of the work that we've done, whether in rural Washington state or Massachusetts or the Mid-Atlantic area. I think the first is that if you want the kind of wonderful integrated communities that Tony and Rip are envisioning, it clearly doesn't come by accident. And you have to actually engineer for it from the very beginning, and you have to engineer that integration of community into the very financing that you work on. And we'll come back to that. Thing two is that partnerships are incredibly critical, but as important as it is to have the right partners, you also need to think very deeply about the structure of partners and partnerships and what everyone's bringing so that you can make public-private partnerships maximally effective. And then third, I want to talk a little bit about innovation. That oftentimes when you're trying to really transform communities, it's not about a completely de novo in the lab innovation. It's about doing more creative things with some of the tools at hand. So let's just drill down quickly into those. In terms of integrated communities, it's amazing to have the vision, as Tony and Rip do, of communities where low-income families can benefit from all the services that we all want them to have: education, healthcare, housing, great things. And I think that somehow, though, there's often, in many places, a sort of field of dreams kind of assumption, which is, well, we'll just build some housing and then good things will happen. We'll put some daycare centers in and that'll help the community. Whereas the good news is we actually know how to build great communities, because if you look at pretty much every affluent community, you see this happening all the time. There's incredibly mindful thinking about how do you pull together housing, education, so that you can walk to work, you can walk to transportation, you can do everything. And so we've given a lot of thought to, well, what can we do? If we're a private sector investor, we're not a mayor, we're not a governor, we're not a policymaker, how can we drive those communities? And our answer has been, with apologies to Gandhi, try to design into your financing investments the change that you want to see in the world. So an example of what we did is we partnered actually with Riff Rapson, that you heard from before, at the Kresge Foundation, and also with LISC, the Local Initiative Support Corporation, which is a national nonprofit, to say we really care about healthcare. We know that healthcare is one of the biggest obstacles for low-income families to really be resilient and do well. And you know what? With healthcare, we know that location matters, right? So if Mrs. Johnson has to take 2 buses and a taxi to get her kid to a checkup, it might not happen. But if you can make it easy, convenient for that to be there, then we can actually start seeing healthcare outcomes go up. And hopefully we can get out of the situation where we are in today, where we know from the research that the single most important determinant of health is not your genetic code, but your zip code. So with Kresge, we said, look, let's put together a $100 million Healthy Futures Fund, where we as the private sector investor will say, we want to help build affordable housing, and we're only going to invest in it if it is tied together with affordable, quality health care. And so that's exactly what we've done. We've done that also with other partners around public transportation. We've invested in a fund that is specifically trying to not build houses somewhere and then hope that people can get to and from their houses, but say, let's build it where we know they are. Just one quick stat before I move on. Today, low-income families are constantly struggling to make ends meet. And what happens is they end up moving further and further from the center city to get more affordable rents. For every single dollar that they save by going to a cheaper location, they spend 77 cents of it back getting back to work. And so those are the kinds of things that we've got to get out of. And so I think as private sector investors, I would say, think about what is the change that you want to see in the world, and make that a condition of your financing so that the finance actually becomes the incentive to build the great communities that we all want to live in. So second, on partners. As you just heard, I talked a bunch about partners already in the Healthy Futures Fund and other funds, and we can't do any of this work without partners. But I think that one of the things that happens is when people talk about partners, sometimes they forget and they think, gosh, a perfect partner would be someone who's just like me, where we all kind of put the same thing in and get the same thing out. And I already see a great shaking head, which I love, which is right. In a partner, you don't want an identical twin. In a partner, you want your complement. You want someone who's got different skills, who's going to bring different things to the table, and who's also going to expect different things back. Right? So the Healthy Futures Fund was only able to happen at a $100 million scale because Kreski said, you know what, we can do something that you can't, Morgan Stanley. We can come in with a grant. We can come in and build the capacity. We can fund nonprofits locally. We can build that stuff. And we're also willing to put in a loss layer. And then you can come in there with big scale capital that otherwise wouldn't have been able to. And that's how you kind of work things together. So for us, partnerships is all about, with apologies to Marx, from each according to his abilities to each according to their needs, right? So let's build partnerships where mission-driven philanthropy gets the mission impact it wants, where a financial advisor, investor is able to come in and really make something that goes to, I think, the very motto of CGI, which is investing in low-income communities, if you do it right, is a great business investment. It's the right thing to do, and you can make it sound and profitable if you structure it the right way. Lastly, on innovation. So we would all, I'm sure, love to have our own personal community transformation policy fairy godmother who would kind of create the tool that we want when we hit that intractable problem. And unfortunately, especially with politics the way it is today, that rarely happens. And so oftentimes, I think we end up feeling more like those engineers in the control room in Houston in Apollo 13, right, where they get that box, you dump this pile of junk on the table and say, use this to get them home. And so I think when we're thinking about problems, a lot of times we try to do that. We say, well, what are the tools we already have? So one example, as I mentioned in this Healthy Futures Fund, it was the first time, we didn't create any new solutions. Well, we didn't create any new products, but we created a new solution by, for the first time ever, pulling together low-income housing tax credits, new markets tax credits, grants, loans, equity, and put it all together into one intentional planned fund. Similarly, just recently, President Clinton was talking about the importance of small business. We've seen that in addition to the missing middle that he described, you got a problem when you're looking at some of the most distressed areas in the country, which is that small businesses can't afford the loans that they can get or can't get loans that they can afford. And there is a great tool in terms of the New Markets Tax Credit Program, which is designed to help companies in some of the most distressed areas. But the problem is, it's kind of, again, like Apollo 13, that sort of, the square hole in the round tube. The new market tax credit is pretty complicated and isn't right-sized for the small businesses. So we kind of took the duct tape and figured out how do you engineer this so we could actually put together a small business loan fund that for the first time ever combines the Small Business Administration's 504 lending with new market tax credits to actually do things like enable a dental clinic in Milwaukee to get new equipment, expand their operations, and hire new people. Or a box manufacturer in Los Angeles who, again, was doing well, wanted to expand, wanted to hire more people, but couldn't do it because he couldn't get the loan until he was able to work with us. So all of this, I just want to bring it home to one story of some work that we have done in the Bronx, where I think we've seen a lot of things come together. About 2 miles from probably the most luxurious real estate you can find in the country, Park Avenue, or choose whichever is your favorite street in Manhattan. About 2-3 miles from there, you end up in the South Bronx, where some of the most distressed, really depressing housing you'd ever want to see. And it's the product of landlords at one point in life thinking, one day I can get these affordable housing tenants out of here, and I can rent it up at market rate, so I'm going to get a big mortgage. They over-leverage it. They can't pay the rent and the mortgage, and they decide to walk away from it. And you end up in these hellholes that we all know. Well, we decided, look, there's got to be a better way. And so we formed a partnership that I'm glad to talk about more later, to say, how do we restructure the debt, get it to be really manageable? How do we work with the city, work with a mission-minded developer to really take this property back? So this is the point in the speech where I should show you an ugly before picture and a sort of a hair club for man, beautiful afterwards picture, and we can all declare success. So I'm sort of going to do that, but not really. So the first picture that I'm going to show is, of course, a requisite ugly picture. And this is not the ugliest picture we could have taken by any stretch of the imagination. If I give you the real ugly picture, it would show the rats falling out of the walls, the Tyvek between your bathroom and your neighbor's bathroom, the pit bull breeding ground in the basement, and the drug bust happening on the roof. And I'm not making that up. That actually happened on one of the properties, not the specific one, when we took our credit officer to approve the loan. Shockingly, he approved the loan 24 hours later. So we joke that we told him we weren't going to drive him back to Manhattan if he didn't approve the loan. But anyway, we didn't really do that. So this is the before picture. And again, I'll show you one of the, not the prettiest after picture, but an after picture. So there's an after picture, that things are nice and tidy, and there's paint. The story, though, isn't the paint. The story is these dirt that's on the ground, but in nice little boxes, right? So for those of you who are gardeners, those are raised beds that we're going to do to build an urban garden. We have 4 adjacent brownstones there. They all come onto a common garden. It used to be a trash pit, and now it's going to be an urban garden. What we did is, and the point here is that I think a lot of times in community development, some of the most important things we do are not what's in the deal documents, or the heart of the deal, but actually what is in the deal documents as, and in addition. So in our deal documents, we said, and in addition. Some of the money that we could have taken as extra return, we actually want to fund an urban garden. And so, so this is going to be an urban garden for the residents of those 4 buildings there. But I think what's really more important is the day after the after picture is when the real work starts. So every day after the day after picture is when you have people like Rosalba Ramirez. She is the daughter of migrant farm workers from California, put herself through school, got a degree in urban development from the University of California, Davis, moved to New York, and she is now, she's living in those windows behind her that you can see in the ground floor garden apartment. She is the caretaker, and she is teaching all the residents of the buildings how to grow food, how to cook healthy meals with the produce that's growing outside their backyard. And for us, I think this is kind of, I love this, sort of keeping this picture in my mind, because this is why we're doing it, right? It's not about what we do when we come in and we structure a loan. That's, if money makes the world go round, then our money helps the world kind of tilt a little bit. But what makes it spiral up as opposed to spiral down is the Rosalvas and the Miss Jerry's, who is a self-appointed sort of whistleblower to any tenant who tries to mess anything up. It's those daily battles of every single day after picture, which is why we do it. And so really excited to talk to you about it all in the panel. So thank you very much.